The traditional Volvo is big. Either a big saloon car to rival the likes of Mercedes and BMW for barrelling along motorways, or a big estate car for carrying you, your family, all their friends, all their families, their dogs and all their luggage in. That is the traditional Volvo. But the 340 isn't a traditional Volvo. In fact, it's not really a Volvo at all. It's technically the DAF 77, what would have been the logical successor to the DAF 66. DAF were searching for a partnership to make the model go forward, and Volvo, who'd initially turned them down, then reconsidered when they saw the Renault engines that DAF had access to, which were far smaller, lighter and more efficient than the bigger lumps that Volvo were producing at the time. In fact, Volvo was so keen to collaborate with DAF after they realised this that they bought a 25% stake in the company in 1973, a stake that raised to 75% by 1975 in time for the release of the 340. DAF Cars was renamed to Volvo Cars BV, and the rest, as they say, is history. On the road, the theme of not traditional Volvo continues. In the 340, the gearbox is actually integrated into the rear axle. That's for better weight distribution and better handling. That's Porsche level stuff, and this is a Volvo family hatchback. What's going on? Whilst it's not traditional fare for the Swedish company, the transaxle does mean that the 340 handles really nicely. It's balanced, it's consistent, the steering weight is really nice, it grips. This is a Volvo, dare I say it, you can hoon a little bit. This is a genuinely fun little car to buzz around in. It's a Volvo, Jim, but not as we know it. This particular 340 is fitted with one of those small engines from Renault that Volvo got in the deal with DAF. It's a 1.4 litre, and actually, it's a really rather lovely one. Revs out nicely, it's punchy, and again, this is not your traditional Volvo engine. It's almost zingy. Volvo were looking at a new sector of the market with the 340. Their usual saloon and estate affair were pitched at middle-class families who wanted to cross continents but in comfort without resorting to something German. But the 340, that was designed to rival the likes of the Golf, cars that would normally fit in the boot of Volvos. Just because they were pitching this at a different market to their traditional cars though, Volvo knew that this car had to still appeal to their traditional buyers, perhaps people who couldn't quite afford a full-size car from them, or who were looking to downsize as they got a bit older. And actually, the more you drive it, the more the 340 feels like a traditional Volvo. For a start, I've got this big, comfy seat that I'm just wafting along and relaxing into. The steering, whilst it is feelsome enough, yeah, not the most direct. The switchgear is proper Volvo as well. It all still clunks and clicks properly, it all still works as it should. This doesn't feel in any way cheap and flimsy. Despite being smaller than Volvo's usual fare, the 340 retains their traditional values of strong and safe. For a start, the weight is 200 kilos more than a comparable Ford Orion, and that extra weight has gone into the 340 to make sure that this thing is as strong and as safe as it can be, despite being smaller than other cars in Volvo's lineup. And Volvo were very keen to promote that safety. Who remembers this ad from the mid-80s?
The Volvo 340, tested by dummies, driven by the intelligent.
What's more, the fuel tank actually sits on top of the transaxle gearbox for better weight distribution, and it means that no matter how much fuel is in it, you get consistent and balanced and predictable handling. Clever stuff. By the time the 340 came out, small family cars like the Golf, for example, were looking more towards transverse engines, front-wheel drive, a more modern, more compact, more accepted formula for a small car. The 340 in that company is decidedly old school, and initially at least, it showed. Traditional small car buyers didn't know what to make of a rear-driven Volvo small car, and Volvo's traditional customers didn't like the idea of something that didn't look and was sized like a tank. What's more, initially, the quality wasn't quite there. There were a few trim pieces that didn't last, and the reliability was subpar. But Volvo didn't want to lose that reputation for durability that they'd worked so hard for. So the initial 75-76 340s were recalled and destroyed. Volvo wanted no evidence of the fact that those cars were low quality, so they pulled them all back, gave the customers brand new, much higher standard cars, and destroyed the evidence. And from there, the 340's fortunes were turned. Now it felt and lasted like a proper Volvo should, and people who weren't quite ready to accept this newfangled front-wheel drive layout were perfectly happy to buy the 340 for that old school flavour they were used to. Ultimately, over its 15-year lifespan, the 340 sold over 1.1 million cars. And because a surprising amount of these cars survive to this day, it's still relatively easy to get one as a cheap classic daily driver. But should you? Well, let's ask Simon, editor of Classics Monthly, who owns this rather lovely 340.
We had one in the family when I first passed my test, so there is a bit of sort of history of the model. I've got fond memories as a teenager going out in it and stuff like that. I like the underdog. This is real porridge stuff. It doesn't get anyone too excited, or not many people. It shouts practical from end to end. Volvos generally do, but this one even more so, because it's not so much styled as all the mechanical bits are there and then the body's put over it where it fits. But it's, you know, it's cleanly done. The proportions on it are nice. I like them. Spacious inside, comfortable to drive. It makes a great family car. One of the big sectors that are into these are youngsters that go drifting, because it's one of the cheapest ways into a rear-wheel drive cars. I think there's got to be a certain amount of irony involved in that to go drifting in a Volvo 340, but some bits, yeah, you can get that no problem, and other bits can catch you out. When I got it, the indicator stalk wouldn't cancel, and it turns out there's a plastic collar that it attaches to that goes around the steering column, and they're a weak point. I did find one in Holland for like £120 just for this collar, and you do the maths on a £2,000 car and you start thinking that's a lot of money, but I got one for £20 second hand in the end. I think I was lucky with that. But that, you know, that could have been a big problem. It's a nice car to own. You might not want to keep it forever, but yeah, why not? Have the experience, see what it's like. You know, it's an interesting car in the Volvo lineup. It did well for them.
It took the world a while to get used to the idea of a small Volvo, and it took Volvo a while to get used to the idea of making one. But eventually, everyone came round to the idea. If you fancy then a cool, alternative, classic car that you can genuinely use every day, sometimes it pays to think outside the box.